Dominic, you and I have a formidable task. So 3 days, over 15 plenary sessions, 50 plus insight sessions, workshops, interactive sessions, both here and other parts of the city, and we get to summarize it all in 5 minutes.
So I think you should start.
So I've heard a couple themes that I think are echoed throughout our panels over the 3 days, including the leaders of Tomorrow Day, and I would characterize them as maybe symptoms. So there's the social questions that we've heard. Dominic, you mentioned at the very beginning, inequality of opportunity is not fundamental to capitalism. And we heard from Neil Ferguson, we learned about inequality that's happening socially. There's negative externalities that are happening. We talked ecologically, things that, for instance, the Nature Conservancy is doing to try to address them in a market-based way. So maybe there's some social issues. There's some political challenges too. So we have lots of political parties that are rising and falling in ways that are unpredictable, that isn't how it's been for the last several years. There's new countries that are rising, that are taking on new roles. China in particular, we've talked a lot about. There's a sense that political systems in different places don't meet the needs of their people in different ways, and then there's some countries that are doing it, like Singapore, like we heard, is going out and meeting directly with the people pretty regularly. And then on the economics and business side, so CSR, is that a good thing? Is that a bad thing? Is that just window dressing? Is it fundamental? Not quite sure. What's the mission? What's the purpose? Even big companies are asking this question because their future employees are asking that question. Is financial returns the only thing that matters, or are there other ways of actually integrating returns into how we think about the purpose of business? So I would suggest that if there was a pyramid, those things sit at the top, and we want to push a little bit further down as we go from here. So what are the actual causes of those things that we can then work to address? So these are inequalities that result from some things, and they result in some cases from systematic issues, and in other cases they result perhaps from individual decisions. Whatever the case may be, each of us sits in a place where we can potentially do something about it and go from this top level of, okay, we have all these problems, and instead of trying to quickly solve the problems, try to understand underneath it what's driving that, and what's my role, potentially big or small, in solving that. There's an interesting phenomenon which, if you are ecologically aware, you'll notice here in St. Gallen, if you walk around in northeastern Switzerland, you notice something that's totally out of place, and that is California redwood trees. Now, if you haven't noticed, we're 9,000 kilometers from California. How are there California redwood trees here? And there are some actually in St. Gallen. These can go 50, 60 meters high. They can live for hundreds of years. Well, it so happens that 100, 150 years ago, there was a vogue among wealthy merchants here in Zurich and St. Gallen to plant these trees because they would grow they'd be enormous if you actually see them. It's called the Mammutbaum in German. Now, the interesting thing about that is they were planted by people who knew they would never actually see them grow because they take 60, 70, 80, 100 years to even start to show their full potential. So what are the things that we're doing in our organizations where we are planting seeds that we're never actually going to see? In fact, their kids didn't even see them grow. We're the ones who get to see them kind of wrapped around weird intersections where somehow somebody has left this tree there, but it doesn't actually belong there. It's because someone looked ahead 100, 150 years or longer. So there's this model of, is there something we can be doing in our organizations that's actually deeper? Because this takes long-term to an entirely different level. And then secondly, it is very dangerous in a business school to try to adopt a new model of leadership or come up with a new conception of leadership. So I'm not going to do that. But what I will say is that leadership is ultimately about making decisions that affect the interests of other people. Because otherwise, you'd just be doing things for yourself. And those other people can be your employees, they can be your customers, they can be your suppliers, they can be your shareholders. But as a leader, you are taking decisions that affect the interests of other people. Have you adequately thought about who those other people are and what those interests are? I'm an optimist. It's not guaranteed to go in a particular way, as we've heard. History repeats itself, but history doesn't repeat itself, but it can rhyme. But it may be in a different language, a different form, or a different meter. So those are two thoughts I would leave with. And Dominic, you've had lots of conversations. You've spoken with different people. You've heard specific things. What are some paths forward that you want to push people to go on?
Well, I just wanted to say a couple of things on reflections. I think it's impossible to summarize the session because I think it's individual for all of us and what we learn and what we pick up, though I think we all should take something specific to do away. I just wanted to say a couple of things about the takeaways. One is just how this whole thing started with the benefactors dinner and the students really challenging everyone to say, let's talk. It'd been uncomfortable. It wasn't certainly what I was expecting, and then we all had our vegetarian food, and it was a bit of a, like, wake up a bit. That was sort of which I thought was terrific. And I thought this last panel was a wonderful close to that too, because it wasn't a happy, jolly little dance, is what I sort of felt in the audience. I think, Brian, you did a great job trying to, but we need to have real talk and tension, and I feel like this conference has done that throughout, and I think that's wonderful. We have to have real conversations, courageous conversations, where we are. And I think that's, again, the students who've organized this have done a magnificent job. The second thing I would say is just back to the theme, again, capital for purpose. I was actually very encouraged that there is a shift underway in the capitalist system towards pushing people to think about the purpose that they have. And it's not just for startups and entrepreneurs, it's for large corporations. And those were very evident in the sessions we had with large corporate leaders and startups together. There's a lot to learn and see. I think of something that Brian said about be aware, ask questions, and see what happens. But capital is, the importance of purpose in capital is increasing. We may want it to go faster, but it's happening. The other thing is that capital can play a more important role in social issues, and I agree with Professor Milligan. It's not going to solve all the issues, but there is a lot of room for that. But capital has to earn a return. It has to earn a return, but then there's a broader set of measures that need to be thought of with it on the impact side. And I thought the discussions around the measures and how we think about non-financial measures was very productive in where it was. And I think that, again, gave me sort of a sense of hope. There's a lot of issues out there, but there's a lot of capital. There's a lot of entrepreneurs. There's a lot of ideas, and there's a lot we can all learn from each other. So long-winded way of getting to your question of, like, what would I do? I remember last year we all have our own organizations and what we can do. And I was in McKinsey back then, my view, and it's a chicken crap sort of promise I made was we are going to hire 5 people without a university degree into our firm, which is a pretty unusual thing for us to do. We've hired 7 into it, and that's not 7 out of 4,500 is not a big number, but in terms of revolutionizing how people think about talent and where talent is, it's different. What I'm thinking about this year is the notion of being more grounded. It's one thing to talk about inequality and the town gown. It's another thing to spend time. And I thought that was interesting, again, in the comments on the panel about how people do that. There's not very many people in this room from that group of people that have been disaffected by the changes that are going on. And one thing that I think irritates people like that in the room is people like us in our room talking about them and how it works without having a connection. So I think we each have our own sort of individual role in how we want to do it to stay connected in what it does. The second is I want to get more involved in startups, not actually because I think I have any value to add, but because it's one of the biggest sources of energy you get. You have to be brain dead if you sit in a room with young leaders of tomorrow hearing their ideas and don't get fired up about where it is. And it's not just capital that's needed, it's also just it's advice, it's business advice. For some of these initiatives to go forward, we need that as we go ahead. So I'm keen to actually, in small ways, try and take whatever we can from this. I think we should all think specifically about what it is that we've learned and how we want to shift it, because if we all move and do our small thing, we'll make a difference, and it'll shift the game. So that's my takeaway.
Thanks very much, Dominic. And thank you for your chairmanship of the day. So as you know, this event has been put on for the 49th time by the International Students Committee. First, you should make sure to not neglect the hundreds of student helpers from the university with the light blue badges who have been running around behind the scenes. Yeah. So, yeah. So the irony of this is they are working so hard, they are working at this very moment. They're not even allowed to see the sessions because they're preparing your dinner for you. But also, again, for the 49th time, an International Students Committee has come together and put on the event that you see here. And I want to invite two of their members, Melanie Monstein and Leonard Krastitias, to come with the final word.
Thanks, Jason, for the introduction. And good evening, everyone, to the wrap-up of the 49th St. Gallen Symposium. Since Melanie and I were trusted with this very important final speech tonight, we kind of feel as a mediator. A mediator between the first 50 and the next 50 years of dialogue between generations. And as a mediator, we ask ourselves, what is going to change? But also, what should stay the same? And even, is it possible that this platform and such an institution stays relevant for the upcoming 50 years? So, to find an answer, there has to be a reason. A reason that defines the St. Gallen Symposium as well as why people come here year by year for half a century now. And the answer we both came across was influence. Influence not in the short-sighted and commercial view. We often experience it on platforms such as Facebook or Instagram or Snapchat. And neither do we mean influence as a kind of manipulative action to change somebody's mind. The influence that we mean is an influence you only have when you're willing to receive it and be influenced yourself. Young students come to St. Gallen every year to take part in global decision-making. And I'm sure that leaders of today come to St. Gallen because they are curious to know what the decisions are going to be in the future. So since influence enables that people come to St. Gallen year by year for 50 years now, we ask ourselves, what does it take not only to experience the 50th, but also the 100th St. Gallen Symposium?
I strongly believe there will be a 100th St. Gallen Symposium because by taking responsibility, one will always have an impact on one another. Before I started the ISC, I was keen on finishing my studies. Being alone in a foreign country without my family and friends was definitely not something I wanted to think about. But as soon as I was informed that I would be responsible of representing the St. Gallen Symposium in Singapore, I had to take responsibility. With the announcement, I was aware that in 5 weeks, I was going to leave for Singapore and stay there for a total of 4 months. I had many meetings to reach my goal of bringing the St. Gallen Symposium near to Singapore. I had to turn my life around, study a new culture, and adapt to their way of living. It was truly a life-changing experience, and I will never forget it, and it definitely made an influence to my mindset and my way of going through life. Forced to act, forced to cope alone, I had to take responsibility for myself and my work, which had an immediate influence on my whole environment, as well as my close circle of family and friends. We want to thank them for supporting us, even though we literally had no time for them.
On Wednesday night, the 3 leaders of our organization committee, Elizabeth, Leah, and Severin, told you that we need to talk. And we sincerely hope that you use your time in St. Gallen to talk. But talking alone does not solve all the problems. In order to make the influence of this platform matter, you also have to walk the talk in the end. And with Capital for Purpose, we brought up a subject that urges for solutions more than ever. We see international institutions and political systems being used for private or national advantage. Professor Simon Evanet this morning mentioned that trade is more dominated by muscles than by brains. And we even see a Swedish schoolgirl taking the lead because politicians and business cannot cope with climate change. So we, as the International Students Committee, took 1 year to bring the most relevant questions to the table. And now it is your time to act. We want you, when you go back to the offices on Monday, to take one of the ideas you remember from the St. Gallen Symposium and adapt them, because then this platform has achieved what it was initially created for.
Since we were just talking about awareness, we would like you to know how we have been aware of what happened around us. The world is constantly changing, and of course, the St. Gallen Symposium is forced to react in order to stay relevant and see a future with the 100th symposium happening. It has become more crucial than ever to transform and progress. It is now the time not only to react, but to act. With this video, we wish to show you a glimpse of how the St. Gallen Symposium will look like when we see each other next year. And we are proud to present the topic of the 50th St. Gallen Symposium, as well as a selection of confirmed speakers.
The world needs a reset because our planet is in danger. The new generation is marching for our future. They call for action. But diverse stakeholders, politics, economics, and societies worldwide are not joining for a global commitment. Society's freedom is under attack. As globalism opens up the business world, new aggressive market strategies emerge, and traditional capitalism comes under fire. Ominously, individual interests rule the game.
Globalism means that some people do better than ever before, and some people do worse than before. That has to cause problems.
While some countries take responsibility for the global community, others call for separation and isolation. Walls are being built. Freedom is in danger.
The Principality of Liechtenstein can look back on a very long and successful history. mainly thanks also to an open dialogue between the generations on long-term issues and values. Such a dialogue is today more important than ever. Therefore, I am very happy and proud to be able to participate at the 50th St. Gallen Symposium, as it offers an excellent platform for such a dialogue.
We need to reset our bearings, take a stance against isolation and fear. Open your mind. Global solutions are needed to create a prosperous future for the planet and all its people. We have to take responsibility to be free.
Today's young have got a unique opportunity because for the first time ever, there's a world education system based on the world language of English. So they can speak to each other, they study in each other's universities, they're connected. The danger is that they become increasingly divorced from their fellow citizens at home.
50 years after founding the St. Gallen Symposium, we must now recalibrate. Freedom revisited. The St. Gallen Symposium is happy to announce our speaker for the next year.
The symposium and its image is transforming. But what will stay at the center of this initiative is a dialogue between generations. St. Gallen is a platform where young people can raise their voice in global decision-making. The first time I personally experienced this potential was when I decided to commit 1 year of my time for this initiative. Last year, I was one of the 450 student workers or student helpers who dedicate 1 week of their time voluntarily to help out the symposium. My job was to drive participants to and from the university, and I heard that you had the chance to meet one of the very many interesting people who come here. So I was just interested in getting to know who are the people who make such a big journey to come to our university. And surprisingly, all the people that got into my car were very open and interested to have a debate. Now that I have the opportunity to experience the St. Gallen Symposium from the inside, I see exactly that debate continuing during the sessions and even during the lunch breaks. This is why I would thank you and thank everybody who came here to enable a dialogue which is focused on content and not on age, gender, or nationality.
I think in the past 50 years, all students who have participated thought the same as you did. But what brings a leader of today to St. Gallen? I think, in the end, this question is quite simple to answer. Curiosity. Look around you. One of the leaders of tomorrow might be your successor. What might you have done differently if you had the chance to be in their age now? How can and will the world change with the ideas of the younger generation? Since curiosity exists on both sides, we have the chance to discuss topics with people of different generations and provoke influence. If we, as the St. Gallen Symposium, will continue to take responsibility, be aware of what happens around us, and go beyond the borders of generations, then we will set the foundation for a 100th St. Gallen Symposium. The experiences you have had for the past few days, as well everything you can see around you, would have never been possible to realize without a team. At this point, we wish to thank thank our 30 team members for taking this journey with us, for all the experiences we shared and the support we received. To sum it up, thank you for the amazing 10 months. We started off as strangers, and now we are as close as family. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome and let us all thank the team, our new second family, which enabled this event, the 49th International Students Committee.